Hi and welcome to the walkthrough video for Surfkiss, our sequel to Snowkiss Guitar. It's the same instrument, only with different strings, and as you can see by the number of key switches, a whole lot of techniques recorded. Before we get to the weirder ones, this is what the ordinary picking sounds like, probably a little twangier than Snowkiss because we used the bridge pickup this time. Most of this video is running through a clean amp sim, but here's the tone with no amp, reverb, or any other effects. There is also picking closer to the bridge, or sul ponticello if you fancy. These are both sampled with 4 velocity layers and 4 round robins. Instead of sampling the whole neck, you just get the choice of open position or first position with the first position button. This is basically because instead of recording positions, we put the time into recording more techniques. For surf music you need tremolo, so there is tremolo implemented for both the above sounds. It's done by triggering one sample when you play a note and another when the note is released. Though if a note is held for long, there's no second sample triggered, so you can finish phrases by holding the note longer. So banging away on the keyboard produces something like this. There is also a pick noise control, which only affects these two tremolo articulations and makes the sound a bit grittier. In case you don't want to have to repeatedly hit a note, there is also the choice of rendered tremolo, which is 2 pre-rendered round robins of me banging away at a key, and instead of note velocity, the dynamics are controlled by the dynamics knob. The other normal articulations are hammer-ons, pull-offs, two types of harmonics, basically 1 octave up and 2 octaves up. There's multiple types of muting: palm muting, ghost notes muted with the fingering hand, and notes muted with both hands. Good for rhythmic patterns that mix muted and unmuted notes, or mix palm muted and double muted. There's also ghost notes picked closer to the bridge to match that picking. There are upwards and downward slides to the note you play from 2 frets away. Combine the upward slides with some of the mutes for something you might not expect from this style of guitar: funk. There's also long downward slides from the note you play, like horn section falls. Each articulation also gets its own patch if you prefer to work that way or need to save RAM. That's potentially useful because even the keyswitch normal uses more RAM than the 512 MB allocation that's default in the current version of Sforzando, and you have to increase the allocation in the settings before loading the patch. And the last technique that's normal enough to be in the keyswitch normal patch is fingering noises. After the fingering, it starts to get weirder and noisier. There is pick stabs with stab locations controlled by the pick stab location selection. Next, the classic offset guitar technique of playing behind the bridge, also with matching tremolo, which also includes a rendered version. There are two sustain techniques, which are looped for infinite sustains and have dynamics controlled by the dynamics knob, but don't have much range. One is repeatedly punching the body while fingering a power chord. And the other is rubbing a spoon on the lowest string as a vague imitation of bowing. Spoons can be used in many ways, of course, and there's also bounces recorded with those, basically using the handle of the spoon like a dulcimer hammer. Similar in sound and concept, but done by hanging an object of the string above the one I plucked, are the wooden clothespin and metal binder clip sounds. All these bounces have 4 round robins, and the clothespins also have 2 velocity layers, which is clearly a violation of the never spend time on any feature no customer would pay extra money for rule of development. And going further into prepared guitar territory, there's also a sheet of paper between the strings in 2 very different sounding locations. There's also a good deal of difference between the upper and lower registers in both cases. The last playable technique, where you hit an E note and get an E, a G gives you a G, and so on, is using one end of a beer bottle as a pick. This is noisy and goes well with randomly mashing the keys to make chaos, and maybe occasionally sustaining a pitch if you want a note. Finally, there's the effects key switch, which includes playing behind the bridge with the strings muted. Pick stabs without any note behind them. Bouncing the spoon off muted strings. Thumping the body in various places, again with the strings muted. Hitting the body in the back of the neck but letting the strings ring. And then sustain noises with the dynamics controlled by the dynamics knob, rubbing various parts of that bottle on muted strings and sliding around the strings randomly, which isn't very noisy with flatwounds. That's all the techniques. These are also available in double track patches, which do what the name says. Every note triggers 2 different round robin samples, with the panning controlled by the width control. More out there are the random articulation patches. The idea is simple: play a note and get a technique picked by a random number generator. This is really random, so if you record some MIDI and play it back, you will get different sounds on each playback. The more notes you play, the more it turns into chaotic, unpredictable noise, which makes both double tracking and tremolo appealing, because by combining both, you get essentially 4 sounds for each key press. Massive distortion makes the sound possibly more normal. I used this along with the behind the bridge tremolo to make the screeches on the Sanctuary demo track. Even without a big reverb, it gets into jet engine or vacuum cleaner territory. And while we have that distortion on, it's a good time to also show the feedback control, which adds a synthesized sine wave and sampled noise to the sustain techniques. With mutes, bounces, and so on, it doesn't do anything because in real life the strings won't feedback when something's muting them. One key to making that feedback sound right is that vibrato and pitch bends affect the pitched parts of the sound, but not the noise or the microphonic feedback. The vibrato is also, as usual with our instruments, more than one simple LFO. The violin vibrato is symmetrical and has the same width for all notes. The guitar vibrato only goes up and does not have any effect on the open strings and doesn't have much range on the lower frets. This means you can play open position chords and add guitar vibrato to bend the fingered notes only. The tailpiece vibrato bends some strings deeper than others, and it goes both up and down. The pitch bend wheel also simulates using the tailpiece and goes both up and down, though the max depth is greater when going down, as I had the instrument set up for the bar to sit pretty high. You can move the wheel around while playing chords to emulate the classic shoegaze glide guitar. I'll add a big reverb here because it's really a huge element of the style. Push the pitch wheel down and then play a chord while returning the wheel to 0 for another very idiomatic sound. There is not one but two sets of release samples. With the release type button off, you get the typical sound of quickly muting the string with the fingering hand. With it on, you get the string being muted with the pick, which is much noisier and probably bad technique in real life, but done intentionally it's good for making things really noisy. The pads patch has two selectable layers which can be blended, and with the attack at 0 it can do more than just pads. In addition to sounds I've already gone through, there are also a few variations of sympathetic resonance, where I fingered two notes an octave apart, plugged one of them and quickly muted it, then used only the ringing tail of the other note for the sample. These are all with no amp sim or any other effects. There is also attack and release controls to make things sound, well, paddier. The unison adds 4 total voices, 2 to each layer, and uses the transposition trick instead of different round robins, so it's intentionally less realistic than the double tracking of the regular patches and fatter. There's also a detune knob for even more thickness. You can also drop the pad layers by an octave or 2, and with sufficiently weird combination, get sounds that don't seem much like a guitar at all. And that should just about cover all the content and features in Surfkiss. If you like it, tell an enemy, and thanks for watching.